This next section, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the software underneath, as well as acquisition to get in, an actual image. Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk a little bit about the VisionPro environment, about QuickBuild in particular, and we're going to talk about the different development methods you could use. We're going to talk about the QuickBuild job in particular. We're going to talk about the different sections that come up, what some of the shortcut buttons do. We're going to talk a little bit about saving and loading VisionPro projects, and that they all use the same suffix. They're all .vpro projects. So we have to be able to know what they're being saved as. And also we're going to create and configure an image source so that we can actually get an image. So let's talk a little bit about software. So VisionPro, it's an environment. It's the whole actual development environment. So if we take a look at this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start at the bottom first and go up. So the very base of this is the hardware. That's getting the image. So this could be through Frame Grabber, it could be through the camera, it could be some images that you already have on your PC that you're just bringing in the digital images, okay? So it's getting that image. That's where the hardware starts. Then you go up to the base software library, okay? So the base software library is all those DLLs, all the actual tools themselves that are underneath that is actually working away on doing the analysis to your image. Then we go to the quick prototyping environment, and that's QuickBuild. So QuickBuild takes all these DLLs. We don't have to know the framework or anything like that. All we have to do is bring those tools forward, configure them, and be able to prototype it on the image that we're looking for. So this is a great way to test a tool. Hey, is this tool going to work for me? What if I tweak this here? What if I tweak this there? Now, one thing I do want to comment on, QuickBuild does not have everything that the library has. It brings up what we think most people want to use, but quite a few of those tools and not all their bells and whistles are brought up to QuickBuild. So they're still underneath the surface. There are also some tools that cannot be brought up to QuickBuild. Just doesn't make sense bringing them up into the particular development environment like that. But just to let you know, this is only a subset of what's going on with the library itself. And then finally, we have the rapid deployment tools. And the rapid deployment tools, that's where we're going to take our QuickBuild application and that we're going to bring it over into a VB.NET application so that that's what our user's going to get, that they're only going to see what we want them to see, have access to what we want them to have access to. So there's a couple of different paths that we can go. The first path is where we start in QuickBuild, throw our tools onto our image, get everything working, and then we take that and we bring it into the application wizard so that we have a deployed program. So we have something to give them. This is what we're going to do for the first 2 days, is we're doing path 1. Okay? So in this case, the advantage is no programming. You don't need to know how to do VB or C# or anything like that. You need to be a little bit logical, but I think that just helps generally. But you don't have to. You really can be a space shot and still do this. It's fast, quick, put things on. You're not thinking about setting up structures or starting things off. You just plop, 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 boom, done. And you can also continue to use QuickBuild. So within the application wizard, there's an option that you can say, no, let me get back into QuickBuild. So if you need to tweak one of the tools, you can't add new tools, but you can tweak one of the tools. Oh, wait, I didn't mean that to, I want to increase what my range for my angle is. No problem. Go back in there, tweak it, come back out, and your wizard is still using that particular tweaks that you had. The limitations is you're going to be limited to whatever the application wizard gives you for your environment. Okay, so it's kind of cool. It brings out a lot of stuff, but it can be restrictive. What if you want to add a button? What if you want to add a checkbox? That's not brought forth in Application Wizard. Okay, so you are restricted to what the Application Wizard's framework says. But that's just path 1. Now path 2, we still start with QuickBuild. We still go to the Application Wizard, but now what we do is we take the generated code that comes from the Application Wizard. We have the choice of whether we want that to be in C# or VB.NET, and then we can go in and start tweaking stuff. Now we can throw a button on. Now we can throw a checkbox on. Now we can, get rid of some of the stuff that we don't want, add some of the stuff that we do want into it. So now we can clean up our environment, okay, make it look a little bit perhaps better. So it allows for you to have some easy customization of what's going on with the code, as well as you're still able to get back into QuickBuild. You're still able to get back into VisionPro. Okay? But the limitations is now you got to know how to program, because now you're getting in there and you're starting to tweak the code that just was generated from the application wizard. And also, you can't go back. As soon as you tweak that code, you're now in that new code. Because if you go to do application wizard again, any tweaks that you made are going to be discarded, and it's going to go back and put it inside the original frameworks of the application wizard. So you are kind of tangled there. But at that point, you're probably like, I don't want to go back into that. You know, I want to stay in this environment that I have here. Then there's path 3. Path 3 is where we start in QuickBuild. So we throw all our tools down really easy and everything. But then we decide, don't want to use that application wizard at all. I'm going to go directly into VB.NET or C#. So I'm going to create my whole environment. That's what we're doing on Thursday and Friday, is we're doing path 3. We take what we started with QuickBuild, but now we bring it, the QuickBuild environment, so it's not completely from scratch, but it's partially from scratch. It's from scratch from the VB.NET and C# area. So we got to bring in our cog job manager and set everything up and choose what we want to display, where we want to display it, when we want to display it, what we want to have access to. So now you have total control over your user interface, and yet you still can get to QuickBuild. You can still go back underneath, tweak up your tools and everything, and still can have it being used inside your final environment. So, but once again, limitation is you got to know how to program now. Got to know how to put this in. And then the final one, can anyone guess what the final path is? None of the QuickBuild. Everything from scratch. Okay? So you're creating everything right from scratch. You're creating your own FIFO. You're calling up the tools from scratch themselves, setting the parameters that you want them to be. Everything's from scratch. So your advantage is you've got total flexibility. Also, sometimes this could be time, because now you're getting rid of all the excess stuff being done behind the scenes. You're choosing what it would be. But you definitely need a program on that one. You need to be a pretty hardcore programmer to get into that.
At that level, do you still get some images? The advantage of QuickBuild, like if you open up a PatMax, we call it a PatMax, you can get a trained image and stuff.
The images are still going on behind the scenes as a record. So those images are still there. The question is how do you want to display them? By having QuickBuild, so like the training scene in QuickBuild, and we're going to find this out when we do that's one of the things that we're going to do, is we're going to allow our user to be able to train from scratch, is we're calling up a certain image that exists within the record of PatMax, and then it's going to show that. So the records are still going on behind the scenes in QuickBuild. It's just how do you want to set them up? I mean, you probably, within this one, I must say I've never done path 4 myself. You might be having to set up your own records, but the records are still there for it to go. The tools know to automatically send things out to them. So it's neat. It is. It's very, very neat. So let's talk a little bit about the QuickBuild environment itself, because that's where we're going to start with. So that's going to allow for us to be able to program the vision tools. It's going to allow for us to add the vision tools to it, connect up to it, and have them all work in unison. It is actually written in the VisionPro API. It is a .NET application that it's creating. It's called the Cog Job Manager. That's what it's doing behind the scenes. Now, we usually suggest people start with it, but usually your hardcore integrators and everything, they usually pull away from this and they start programming it themselves. But it's great for them to start seeing how is this working, how is it interacting. Now, since I can see this, I can pull it back and do it within my own application. Also, any of these reference control forms that come up for any of our tools, you can also just get the control form itself and bring it into your environment. You don't necessarily have to have the QuickBuild structure to use those little references. We already built those forms. You can bring those forms into your application if that makes it easier for you. Now, what it's going to do is you've got a couple of different levels with VisionPro. You have your application level, okay? So your application level is going to allow for you to have multiple jobs. Now, it says that each job has one image source. That's kind of changed a little bit as of 7.2. You can actually have multiple image sources per file. But let's just keep it simple in our mind and say one image source. So it's easier for us to think, okay, I have a camera. I'm going to have that do certain tools, and that's going to be one job. Now, my next camera might be looking at something else. It's taking a separate image. It's going to do a separate set of tools and do its own. Okay? So what this is doing is this is allowing for one application to control multiple cameras, with each camera doing its own thing. And it's going to be run serially. Okay, as it goes through each job and everything, and lets you do the threading so they're running separately. Usually it's one job at a time. It starts going through and runs them. You'll also notice that we have our posted items. Our posted items are the details within our application that we want to bring up to the .NET level so that we can grab it inside either C# or VB.NET, that we can actually grab what those are. Now those are usually for our application wizard. When we start getting towards the actual programming itself, we're going to dig right down and grab what we want. But this is for the application wizard. What are those different components that we want to bring up so that we can show it for our user to get access to? In our Communications Explorer, all the jobs use the same communications. So if I have my measurement computing set up for my discrete I/O, that all the jobs are using the same discrete I/O. So we need to decide, well, which jobs are going to control which lines? Or are they going to somehow conflict with each other? Oh, I'm sorry, multiple jobs run in parallel. That's where the job itself runs in serial. Multiple jobs run in parallel. Now, if we think about the structure, we have the application, so the application is going to hold the multiple jobs. Within a job, you're going to have multiple tools, and the tools are going to run off the image that you have coming into it. So if we look at it as kind of a block diagram, this application holds 2 jobs in it. Each of the jobs have a couple of tools that they're running. They don't have to be the same tool. They can be doing their own thing because they're doing their own image. Okay, so it's pulling from the image in RAM, running its tools on it, getting those results, and so each of the jobs is going to have their own results to feed back up to the application level. Now at the application level, what we're going to see is you're going to see that if you have saved the application, it's going to be a .vpp file. Well, application will be saved as a .vpp. A job will be saved as a .vpp. A tool will be saved as a .vpp. So what I suggest to people, make your names make sense. If it is a tool, say something like PatMax tool, my super cool tool. So you know that is a tool versus whether it's an application or a job. Unfortunately, our naming structure does not help you, but it does help. All that it's doing is it's a serial file going on behind the scenes. It makes it easier for them to be able to load things back and forth. Fortunately, it can just confuse us with the naming. Now it's going to show you your multiple jobs inside our window there. So it's going to give you your job name. You can always change them if you want. And then we also have our Communication Explorer, which once again, our Communication Explorers will be used by all your jobs. We also have our little navigator here in case you need some help of where do I need to go? Do I need some help getting from here? Now we also have some shortcuts up here. Now if I'm at an application level or even at the job level, we're going to see this red square. Or not red triangle or arrow that you might want to call it. What this does is a single acquisition. If I'm at the application level, it makes all the jobs do one acquisition. Okay? If I'm at the job level, which we'll be at in just a moment, it only makes that particular job do one acquisition. Okay? So that just says give me a single acquisition. Versus this one, which puts you in continuous mode. Okay, it just will acquire, run the jobs, release, run the tools, release the image. Acquire, run the job, run the tools, release the image. So that just keeps doing it. If I'm at the application level, once again, does it for all the jobs. If I'm at the job level, only does it for that job. You can, of course, open, save, or copy. Now, notice that there's a different little design right here for this. These right here are for jobs. So remember, I'm at the application level. I can add more jobs here. Okay, so this is a way that I could add a new job, bring in a new job, create a new job, save it, copy it, whatever, so I can bring some jobs in there. Then we go on to reset the application. That just puts everything that if I had numbers or something counting, that it just resets it back to what the default state was. Whether we go online or offline, this tells us for our Communication Explorer, this lets us, I call these the blue orbs. This lets us know whether we're online or not. That just means our I/O is enabled, versus the Communication Explorer, which lets you set up your I/O. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And our posted items, that's going to show us what we have posted up to the .NET layer. We can go over here. We can get some application settings in here. And over here, we have some sample code or tooltips. We can bring that up, and it will allow for us to take a look at some sample code. So that's the application level. We're not going to hang there very much during the next 2 days. We need to know that it's there. We need to know what's going on. But what we're going to be more concerned about is the job itself. Because the job's the one that's going to take the acquisition, and then what tools do we want to run on it. So within there, you're going to see it's going to have an image source. Like I said, we could have multiple ones, but it always starts with one, and that's what we're going to tie to our camera. And then it's just a matter of all the tools. And we're going to be able to connect the outputs from one tool to the input of another tool so it knows, hey, this is how I'm using it. Now, one of the cool things through this structure is you can't accidentally connect one terminal to another one unless they're of the same type. Okay, so it knows what type it is behind the scenes, so it's not going to let you take a double and shove that into an image one. It's not going to let you connect that. It says, I'm sorry, you're not the same type, I'm not letting you connect it. So this is something we have to think about while we're creating things. Also, you're going to notice that it gives us job feedback status. Lets us know what's going on. It has 2 times here. One time is the amount of time that it takes to run all the tools. In this case, I'm looking at the job itself. So how long does it take for all the tools to run? The second time, can anyone guess what that one's for? Is the image acquisition is built in with the first one as well. Display. So all your graphics. So your first one is how long it just takes to run the tools. The second one is how long it takes to display the graphics. Because if you're not in an environment that you're displaying those graphic records, then you don't need to take the time for the tool to run itself without the graphics. The first one is how long it takes. If you want to see the graphics coming from it, then it's the second one. Yes, if you're showing it just like this, if you're using QuickBuild inside the environment and you're showing the displays like that, that's how long it's taken to generate the graphics with it as well. It's just putting it on different threads at that point. Though, I'm sorry, I do take that back. We are going to run into a problem that, yes, it will not allow for you to acquire for that thread until that thread's released. So as far as the graphics, that might be partially off, but we're going to, when we do on Thursday, we're going to try to run it twice real quick, and it's going to say, wait, you can't do another call to the job until it's released the first one. It's got to at least go through its first run. And then you'll notice that over to our right-hand side over here, we also see the image and the graphics, and we're also going to have a pull-down there. And the pull-down is going to let us get to different images, because it's going to create records, and it's going to create different images depending on the record that we're looking at. Now, if we look a little bit closer at the job, once again, we're still going to be able to run once or run continually. But remember, this time has to do with the job itself. Okay, so it's only going to run that job. It's not going to run the other ones. Only that job is going to take another acquisition. You can keep the programming window and the display together, or you can make them separate, depending on because it's only a .NET program. Reset. This allows for you to configure your image source or go into live mode so that you can adjust your focusing and lighting for your image. We're going to talk, this is how you would bring in your tools themselves. So this is going to bring up our whole list of tools that you can drag and drop them into the environment. We're going to talk a little bit about this one when we start going into scripting, so we know what's going on there. And then, of course, we have some help. And these are just some object editors as well as floating point display that gives you some information that's going on. I'm going to hold off on those because we're going to cover that a little bit more tomorrow, because that's when the floating point display starts coming into terms, is when we start coming into more of a deployment. We see the image and we see any posted items coming from the image. Now, when we get to the tool itself, tool is still going to have a run once. But when you say run once here, it does not take another acquisition. It only runs the tool with the giving settings. Okay, so if you wanted to update some of the settings and run the tool, then how would it react to that same image that's sitting in it? Or you can turn on this is called electric mode. And what electric mode does is it'll put a little lightning bolt against some of the parameters. And these are parameters that you would normally change, and it lets it run. Every single time you change that parameter, automatically runs it, so you don't have to keep going back and say run, run. It just, so allows for you to try to tweak it until you get what you're expecting it to be. Of course, the tool name will be up there, and it also gives us, once again, our tool feedback and status, as well as timing for each. When we get a little bit closer into there, you can notice that you can save and load particular tools. What would be an advantage of saving a tool out? I can see saving an application, even a job. What's an advantage of a tool? Exactly, that you have been you tweaked this tool, you made it work just perfectly, and it's going to be similar for your other applications. Why recreate the wheel? You save that out, and then you can just bring it into the other applications, just drop it in, make your connections, and bam, it's all set up, ready to go. Also notice, remember your image selector over here, because we're going to notice that each of the tools are going to have different images as well. So when we go to add a tool to the job, what we're going to do is it's going to give us a little line there as we go to add a tool, and we can place it anywhere here that we want. We can never place it above the image source. Any idea why you can't place it above the image source? Because the image has to run first, exactly. Even though your application will run in parallel with the different jobs, your job itself will run serially. So always grabs the image first and runs right down the list of tools. It keeps itself, for the most part, on one thread. So you would open up your toolbox. So you would hit your little tool icon here that looks like a hammer and a wrench together. Bring up your toolbox. And then you would choose which tool you want, just drag it and drop that into your program. Then what you're going to see is you're going to see some magenta and some teal, okay, some pink and some bluish terminals here. Now pink means that it's an input terminal. It means something needs to be fed into it. Anything that's bluish means it's an output terminal. It means it's pushing some out. What it will do is it will give you what it thinks most people want for output terminals. Those aren't the only ones that it has. Those are just the ones that it's going to auto-insert. Okay? So you can get rid of them if you want. You can add more if you want. It's not a problem. Now what you need to do is you need to start attaching things. So at this point, if I'm using my PatMax image here, I need to take my image source and feed it into the input image of the tool. So now the tool knows, oh, I'm using that input image. Okay? You'll also notice that the output image from the image source is also feeding into this fixture tool. And then in this case, we also have information coming out of our PatMax tool that's being fed into our fixture tool. So all that we're doing is just dragging and dropping things and just pulling things over and connecting it. And as we start adding more and more tools on it, pulling it down starts becoming very, very slow. You can also go to a terminal, and if you right-click on it, it will say link to, and it will show you all the list of potential links that it could have. So this can kind of help, you know, differentiate what you can connect to. Like, I've got to connect to an image. What image can I pull from? And it will only show you the images that it could possibly pull from, not all the different terminals. Now, your application wizard, like I said, is going to take your job that you've just created in QuickBuild, and it's going to allow your user to be able to see what's going on. It's going to add a row per job that you have up here, and it's letting you know whether it was a success or not a success. It's also going to show you the images coming from it, and it's also going to give you this little pull down for your images so that you can look at different images that belong to that particular job. And then over here, it's going to allow for you to give them the ability to see some of the outputs, as well as whether you want to give them the ability to do any of the inputs. You can choose also, there's a configuration button that's grayed out right now, but if you say during your application wizard that you want them to be able to get back into QuickBuild, the configuration will allow for you to push it, and your little QuickBuild environment comes back up again. It's a subset of the real QuickBuild because you can't add new tools at that point, but at least it allows for you to tweak the tools that you have. Now, your Windows support. So, of course, we support the XP 32-bit all the way up through everything. We haven't added the 8.2 out. I don't think they quite released that one yet. Notice Vista was kind of short. I'm not sure anyone ever used Vista. We were asked to work in Vista, but then I've asked people, have any of you ever integrated? And I even asked the engineering team, and they said no one's ever actually deployed on Vista. And then, of course, Windows 7, we do both 32-bit and 64. I'm not sure why they don't have X's here, but it does support both 32-bit and 64-bit Windows 7. So let's talk a little bit about image acquisition. So some of the basics. So you have this image sitting out there in the real world. And what you need to do is you need to bring that image into it, and at some point it needs to be digitized. Okay, that's what needs to be brought into the Pell buffers beneath, because that's what the vision tools are going to work on. Now, this digitizing can either happen at the camera, like FireWire cameras and GigE cameras, it's going to happen on board the camera, or in the case of like the 8500, it happens on the board itself, the ADD converter. But it all somehow gets to a digitized image. And that's what we're going to be looking for, is the actual image. Now, one thing I should state is we need to see it. Okay? If it's not being seen in the field of view, We're not inspecting it. Yes, this sounds like a duh moment, but you would be surprised how many people are thrown off by it. Okay, we are not psychic. We have not created the psychic tool yet, so got to keep that into consideration. So when we take a look at it, okay, it doesn't quite look like this, but let's pretend that this cup of coffee gets put into these individual pixels. So the pixel is going to have an XY coordinate, and it's going to have a grayscale component. Unless, of course, you're a color camera, then it's going to have a color component to it. Your X is going to be going across, your Y is going to be going down, with the upper left-hand corner being 0, 0. This is just your basic pixel coordinate system. Okay. Now, as far as the color, what's happening with the grayscale is it's how much light is being picked up in that area. So if you've got a lot of light that's hitting that particular area, what's going to happen is that's going to make that charge, or it's going to go over to ADD converter as being pretty high there, and they're going to mark it as a high number from 0 to 255, where 255 is white and 0 is black, means no light hit in that area. So between those, we have 256 levels that we can choose for a grayscale value. Now 256, what's so special about 256? It's binary. It's a power of what? It's power of 2, but what does it go to? 8-bit camera. So our basic, like what we're using right here, is an 8-bit camera. Now VisionPro can do 12-bit. They can do higher bit cameras and everything. But the base and what most of the tools interact with, though they are starting to make some of the tools work in 12-bit, our base is 8-bit. Everything works in 8-bit. That's just the standard one. Now what we need to do is we need to let the system know how are we getting the image. So we can do this either by double-clicking on the word image source or going up and hitting what looks like a camera with, I think it's a pencil, shoved into it, saying that you're editing the image source. So when you open that up, it's going to give you your choice. Do you want to pull your image from an image database, or do you want to pull it from the camera? Now if you pull it from the image database, you can pull it from an individual file or a folder full of images. Now the images don't have to be all of the same format. You can have some color in there, you can have some different res and everything, and sometimes it will bring all those in, but it might throw some issues otherwise. You know, think about the tool that it's going to. If you have a color image and you're sending it to a tool that does grayscale, that might throw some things off. But just to let you know, you can do that. Or you can actually say, no, I want to pull it from a camera. Now if you say that you want to pull it from a camera, then it looks into the system and it says, well, what type of cameras do you have out there? In our case, it's going to see our Gig E camera. But if we're using a frame grabber, it's going to see the frame grabber. If we're using multiple frame grabbers, it will show each individual frame grabber. So you choose which frame grabber you want to use. Then you go down and you say what format you want. Now in the case of like this 8500, which is your analog, there's going to be a whole list of formats you can do. You know, do you want half res, full res? Do you want it to be in PAL mode, CCIR mode? I mean, what do you, all these different formats you can choose from. Now for ours, it's going to choose that, well, do we want mono, color, because it's a bare filter, or this packed I think it's YUF or something like that. So we're just going to go for the mono to make it easy. Okay. And then if you're using some type of port with it, like once again on our frame grabbers, it can usually have multiple ports, you say what camera you want. Keep in mind, we are a zero-based system. So that means our first camera is going to be on port 0, not port 1. This also goes over to tools too. Your first result for your tools is going to be result 0, not result 1. Now if you want to get a better image, you can go in and set control the exposure. Now keep in mind, if you increase the exposure setting, these are for any cameras that are electronically exposured, you are adding to your acquisition time. So you are adding to your cycle time. But in some cases, that's okay. Like you're going to notice I'm going to have to up the exposure on mine because I'm in a pretty dark area of the room and I don't want to add some extra lighting. Otherwise what I would do is I would do some outside lighting into it to bring up the lighting so that I can keep my exposure setting down. Also your brightness and contrast. You can actually go in on some of the cameras that have the ADD converter right there. You can be adjusting what your brightness and contrast is. Your contrast is going to be your spread of your gray values. It's what's going to add your contrast. So if you increase that, it's going to make it where it looks for the light to dark, it makes that change much quicker. While if you lower that, it's going to make it look a little bit fuzzier. It's going to dull it out a bit. Now, your brightness is just shifts the collective grayscale value. Okay, so if everything seems really, really dark and you bring it up, you're just bringing everything up a bit so that you're trying to make it brighter. Okay. We also have the options of strobing and triggering it. Okay. I want to concentrate on trigger because trigger is really what we're caring about, is how are we getting that image. I mean, strobe's pretty straightforward. Connect up the strobe and you can set your time. But triggering, what are the different ways that I can trigger? Well, you have manual, and manual means it's a software trigger. It's like hitting that little red triangle on that screen. It's saying, I want a one-shot trigger. Tell me what to do it. So it means that I'm saying something to it to say, acquire, run once. Then I have free run. And free run is the same as that little yellow round type arrow. It's saying run as fast as you can. I'm going to grab the image, run the tools, release the image. Grab the image, run the tools, release the image as fast as I possibly can. One of the advantages also to free run exists with line scan cameras. If I'm running at free run with line scans, instead of having to have some type of recharge period, some type of gray zone, with our systems we can go right from one image right to the next one right after it. So you have no gap of uninspected area there. So with the line scan you can just keep it so you have 100% inspection. Hardware auto, that's your proc switch. That means you have something from the outside telling it, acquire now, acquire now, acquire now. Usually when you're doing FireWire and Gigi cameras, these are going to be coming from the actual source here. While if you're doing the any of the frame grabber cameras, then you need to let it know because you're running the trigger through the actual frame grabber. And finally, hardware and semi-auto. I had asked engineering why they would use that before, and they said, well, obviously someone used it, but it's not as helpful. All that I could figure out is it might be good if you're trying to do some safety on it because it's got a hardware component and a software component. So basically you need to arm it first and then say, now anytime I see some type of hardware trigger I will arm. So I'm thinking like if you have a safety shield, that if the safety shield is up, your program doesn't arm the software yet. It says, hey, not until that shield goes down, then my program knows it's down and says, okay, I can now start triggering the camera. So now as the parts goes by, it will trigger when the part goes by. So then you're going to run the job. Now these images are going to come through and you're going to see the image up here. Now in this case, this is a last run.output image. That means in this case, that was what my image source had. That was the last image it just took, sitting in memory. If you want to go to live display, you can just turn on the live display. It'll give you a floating window and you can go in and do your focusing, do your aperture setting to make it look right. You can also, with your floating displays, you'll notice that it will give you where it is. Like when you hover your little cursor over there, it's going to give you your X and Y location down here. It says this pound space. It's giving you it in this root space. That's what the pound is for. It's saying that it's root space. Okay. This is going to come into play a little bit later when we start talking about all the fixturing spaces and whatnot. But this is our default root space, which is the acquired space. And then over here it's going to give you what your intensity is. So you can give what the grayscale value is. So it's, in case you're trying to like maybe set up some thresholding, some hard thresholding, you can find out, well, what are the values that I'm looking for? What would be that right number I would pick? Also within your displays, if you right click, you can say zoom out, zoom in, you can pixel grid it. You can also say the zoom wheel. So if you do the zoom wheel, that allows for your mouse to zoom out and zoom in. Now be careful. When you just hover over the images and you go do the zoom wheel, it's automatically going to go through the different images you have. So you've got to click on that image and then you can zoom out and zoom in. Pretty simple. So what we want to do is our first tool. I always feel so let down when this is our first tool. But what we want to do is we want to get some images. We want to get some images and we want to save them because we're going to use them later. So we're going to use the image file tool to be able to get these images. So the image file tools will be able to save images or append them to an existing file. The types that are supported are like IDB and CDB, which is just a collection of bitmapped images. Bitmapped itself. The TIFF format, JPEG, as well as PNG. So we can do all of those. So some of the reasons that you might want to do this is maybe you have some images that you've already taken from the line, and what you want to do is you want to build up your program and test against those images. You want to make sure that your program is going to work with it. Or that you're just trying to get images from a production run. Like maybe you're just starting up, it's going by, and you're like, well, let me get some images so I have something to work with. Now they say like only failed parts. They mislead you here. That image file tool, not from QuickBuild can you do that. I'm going to show you through scripting how you can save just bad images. Okay, so because you do need to go back and turn it off so it doesn't run on the good ones. So when I bring up the image file tool, and if I bring in a folder that has multiple images in it, notice that some of these have different resolutions. Okay, some of them are color, some of them aren't color, but that's fine. It's letting me bring in all those different images that it's looking for. I'm going to be able to select on one. The one that's in blue is my selected image. So I can go through and select on one, or I can just kind of play it through. Okay, so it would just go to the next one, then the next one, and the next one, and so forth. It's going to tell me where it pulled the images from. Also, these 3 dots says, hey, let me go look to where I want to point you to. So if this is blank, I can just hit this, point to some place in my hard drive to say, hey, this is where I want to pull my images from. Now you're going to have 2 modes in the image file tool. You're going to have the read and the write mode. So guess what the read mode does? It's going to pull your images up. It's going to bring it and read it into the image. Guess what the write does? Saves it out. It appends it. It appends it. So it's going to add it to the file that you already have. So what we're going to start with first is just the read, because that's just a simple one. Bring the read forward. So in order to bring it in, you need to bring in an open to image file. Okay? Or you can create, well, you can't create a new one because you haven't written anything out first. So you've got to bring in those images. So if you say open, now notice that it's not here. This open is for opening tools. This is for opening image files. This is the one that actually has 2 separate areas here. So I want to open an existing image file. So I would go, pull where it was, and now it will bring the information on there. It'll tell me how many images I have there, and it's going to allow me to navigate through them. It's going to give me 3 images in my pull-down list. I'm going to have current input image, last run output image, and selected image. Those are the 3 images it uses. Now my selected image is going to be the one in blue. So whichever one that I've chosen in blue, if I go to selected image, that's my current image that it's seeing. That's my selected image. Then I have last run output image. So when I run the tool so it goes to the next one, that's the next tool. That's the next one that it just ran by. Okay, that's the one that it's just grabbed. To get that other one, which is the input image, we got to go to the write mode. And the write mode is where we're going to save images into the tool. So what to make it a write mode, we've simply pressed down the little record button. Now every time this tool runs, it's going to record whatever's waiting for it to come in. So that's where my current input image is. The current input image is that image waiting to be written to the file as soon as you tell it to run. So let's see if I actually have this. Nope, it doesn't have it. Let me go back just, if I can find what I'm looking for here. They don't have it. Okay, so let me see if I can just go forward. Okay, let me just go forward to this one. I'll go back in just one moment. So what I would have is I have my image source output image being fed into my image file tool. So in QuickBuild, normally all these things would go so quickly. You know, but if you're trying to look at each individual one, let's say that we could do breakpoints in there. What would happen is I would say acquire. I would run my job. It would take another image. The image would be sitting out here. Now, before this ran, my input image would be the one sitting here, getting ready to come in. The output image would be the last one that it had already taken care of. Okay? So as soon as the tool ran, then my input image would then become my output image. So when we run it, it all happens all at once. But if we were to break it down, that's what's happening, is the input image is the one waiting to come into the tool. Do they have the... yeah, this doesn't really tell you anything. Oh, except for when we're doing recording, you can create a new one. So you can create your own file. Now be careful with this. The default is BMP. So if I just give a name and I don't give what file type I'm looking for, you're going to keep saving over that same image. If you're trying to say multiple ones, make sure you state that it's an IDB or a CDB. There's really no difference between IDB as an image database. CDB is a Cognex database. So obviously it was one that we've been using for a while. Now keep in mind, like I also told you before, we have two sets of saving and loading. So one is for the tool itself, saving and loading the image file tool. The other one is the actual files that it's looking at, the image files that it's looking at. If you save one, it does not save the other. So just because you save the image file tool does not mean that you have saved the image file. So you've got to do both. So VisionPro is a combination of camera and or your frame grabber hardware. Your software library, you got a whole list of them of all the different vision tools. QuickBuild allows for you to real quickly bring in the vision tools, so the application, you can quickly use them and see how the application goes. And the application wizard allows for you to finalize it into that .NET type application. That's what you're going to give your user. That's what they're going to interact with. QuickBuild manages one or more jobs within the application level. Keep in mind that the job itself is where you put the tools, because that's going to be for that camera taking that image. And keep in mind that each of the tool layers will manage the settings for each tool. And the image file tool is just a quick way to be able to record and play back some of your images. So let's try this out. Okay. So I'm going to shut down my display, and I am going to open up QuickBuild. So on your desktop you should have a little shortcut that brings you to QuickBuild. So I'm going to double click on it. It takes a couple of moments to come up. Now I'm going to show you the lab. If you start getting lost, don't worry. Watch what I'm doing, because I'm going to give you time right afterwards to do it yourself. So, you know, for this one you might be able to keep up with me, but as I go on to other ones you might want to just watch, see how it's going, and then try it yourself. So what I've done is I've just created a default application. So it says Cog Job 1. It's got an image source, posted items. I'm not needing another job right here. Okay? So what I want to do is I'm going to go right into Cog Job 1, because that's where I'm going to start putting my tools. So if I double click on that, it brings up my job. Now I'm going to go ahead and just make this full field of view, because that's really what I'm caring about, is the job itself. Now I've got to set up the image source, because you'll notice I don't have a little live display because it doesn't know where it's pulling it from yet. So what I need to do is I need to set up the image source. So I can either double click on the word image source or click on this initialize image source. Both of them will take me to the same place. So if I click on that, it's letting me see, well, do you want to pull them from a file or a folder? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, no, I want to pull it from my camera. That's what I want to see. I got to get an image first. So I'm going to click on camera, and then it says, okay, what's your acquisition device or frame grabber? So if I pull this down, all that it sees is just my Gigi camera. If we were all on the network, we would all see everyone's Gigi camera, which would make this a nightmare application for everyone. So the fact that I only have you have one, you only have one to choose from. Now it asks me what formats I have, because now since it knows that it's a Gigi camera, it has set up what its possible selections for formats. So in this case, I only have my generic Gigi Vision formats, which is, it can either be in color, it can be in mono, or this YUV 422 pack. I have no idea what this is used for. All I care about is mono. I just want to do grayscale. So I'm going to say mono here, and now I have to initialize acquisition. So as soon as I say initialize acquisition, you'll see this information put down here, and also I now have a live display button I can hit. So if I hit the live display, let me go ahead and make this full screen, you'll notice that it's actually is a live display of my image, and I can try to focus it and adjust the aperture setting. Now, unfortunately, this is about as bright as I can get it up here. So what I need to do is I'm just going to go out of live for a moment here, and I'm going to up my exposure setting to, like, let's say 32. Normally I wouldn't do this. This is adding 32 milliseconds to my acquisition, which normally I wouldn't, but since we're doing just simple acquisitions here, so it's not a big deal. So if I go back into live mode, notice how much brighter my image is now. You guys shouldn't have to go up to 32 because you've got a lot more light than I have up here, but I can always now maybe adjust my lighting just a little bit and adjust my focusing on this. So it looks pretty good. I want to make sure that my whole card is in here. So notice I'm going from up in this area all the way down to here. I want to make sure you get all this. Whether I have the sides or not, I don't care. That's just your own, you know, your own path there, but this is what I want it to look like. So now that I have an image, if I just close this, notice that if I run it once, it's going to show me my image here. Okay. If I hit the little yellow curly arrow, notice that it's like a live image. Okay. It really is acquiring, constantly running all the tools, but right now I have no tools. Notice that the tools, oh, this is kind of broken off in your bottom here. Oh, okay, it doesn't display everything here. Let me just pick this up for a moment. So you see, do you see how at the very bottom? Does this go down anymore? Notice this is how long it takes to actually run the tools. And this is how long it's taken for like the graphics and everything being thrown up there. And it's jumping around a bit. But all I'm doing is I'm just acquiring. That's all that I'm doing right now. So now I'm going to stop that because what I want to do is I want to add an image file tool. So in order to add an image file tool, I'm going to go up to my tool, VisionPro Tools, open that up, and I have a whole list of tools here. So I want to look for the actual file tool. So if I take a look down, all of us start with cog. So cog. Oh, here's my image file tool. Let me move this over and let me drag this here. Now notice it gives me a line. The line can never go above the image source. Remember we had already said it can't go above the image source because why? Image has to happen first, exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and drop it right there. So notice it puts it in here. Now it's going to come out in black. Okay? You can go in there, I'm just going to close up my VisionPro tools because I'm not using them again. I could go in there and do a right click and rename it. Rename it anything I want. Why might I want to rename it?
Make it something application specific. It means something in your application.
Sure, I could make it application specific, or if I'm going to be using multiple Vision file tools, I could say so I know which one's doing for what, you know, so I have an idea. Might not be so apparent right here, but as we start using some of the Vision tools, it's going to start becoming very apparent. Okay, so I could always go change it. I'm going to end up deleting this in a moment, so I'm not worrying about changing it. I just want you to know that it's there. So what I need to do is I need to take from the output image, and I could drag it over to the input image. Okay. I could also go in, if I'm looking at this arrow and I right click, I could say unlink if I made a mistake. Okay, and it would unlink it. If I go back to here, I can also right click and say link from, and notice that it only shows me I can only come from my output image source. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that. Now it's still black. Okay. I need to run it once so that at least the image tries to get into the tool. But notice the tool becomes red. Any reason why? Right, I haven't set it up yet. I'm not in record mode, so it's letting me know, whoa, nothing's getting recorded. You're trying to push some images in here, and I can't do anything with it. You know, what's up? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and double click on my image file tool. And what I want to do is I want to create a file. I want to save some of these because I'm going to use them later. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my 3 dots. Okay. And if I had something there, I would go choose it. But since I'm actually trying to create a new one, let me just say cancel for a moment. And instead, I'm going to go up here and say create new image file. So if I click on that, it's going to say, okay, where do you want to save that new image file? I'm going to go ahead and say desktop. It's going to make it easier for me to find later. And I want to name it a file name. I'm going to call it Diana. My dog is named Diana, so I love using that name whenever I can use it. But if I don't put in what type it is, by default it's going to make it a bitmap, which means with every image it's just going to keep saving over the same name. I don't want that. I want multiple images. So I'm going to pull this down and I'm going to force it to be an IDB or a CDB. If I don't say anything, it will automatically be an IDB. Otherwise I could say .cdb and it will force it to be a .cdb. So I'm just going to leave it right here. I'm going to let it go to an IDB and say save. So now you'll notice that it automatically says, okay, up here, users, cognoid, desktop, diana.idb, that's where it's going to save it to. So and it automatically has me in record mode. So now if I come out to my job and I hit my run once, saves that image in there. Okay? Let's say that I might put my finger, I'm putting my finger over the word pass and run it again. Now notice it shows me it right here. Now it's not showing me any image here. You might say, well, why not? By default, it's saying I'm showing the selected image, but right now I haven't selected an image. If I select one, then that would be it. So whichever one I actually select in blue, that's the one that's going to show a selected image. Otherwise, if I say last run output image, it's the last one it's saved. Now watch what happens. My finger's not in front of the camera, right? Watch what happens if I hit this run. Oh, still has the finger there. Why? My finger's not there now. I ran it. Why did it still have the finger there? Exactly. What happened was I ran it from the tool. So what happened was it didn't get a new image source. It's still sitting there with the last acquired image. So it doesn't see what's there. So now if I actually force it from the job itself, notice, yes, it is indeed without my finger. Let me go ahead. I'm just going to flip this over. I'm going to just take a couple of those images. So let me go ahead and record once there. Maybe turn it just a little bit. Record once there. Just so I have a couple of different images. Okay. And when I'm done, I can go out of my write mode, okay, so that I don't accidentally record into this again. Notice that if I try to run the job, it's going to give me, well, it knows that I'm only in playback. So even though this output image is trying to come in here, it just ignores it, and it says I'm just going to start going through my images right here. Now let's say I wanted to bring this back and let this be what I'm looking for, okay? Let these be the images I want to use in my job. It used to be that I had to close this first. Now it's not being so touchy about it, but I suggest to you that you want to close the image database first. By closing the image database, it allows another application to grab a hold of it. I've seen this act strange, and what it will give you back as a error, it'll say bad format. Doesn't make much sense, but it means that it's trying to make use of an image database that's active.
What did you call the image database?
Image database is going to be, so like if I open this up again, pull Diana, say open, it's this little one right here. It says close image. I believe it'll happen. Let me just check it to make sure. If I say record mode, I think it'll happen right here. If I go up to my image source and I say, okay, now I want to choose a file, and I choose Diana, and then I try to run it, it should give me, oh no, see, this is where I'm saying it shouldn't have let me do that. And all that it's doing right now is it's just running through those images in the image database. I said it used to say bad format. I just like to bring that up because that is kind of an off shot. So that would allow for me now to run that image database through it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to camera, make sure that I have an actual item underneath here now. And I'm just going to close this up, and I'm going to close this. And now all that I need to do is I'm just going to delete this. I'm not going to keep the tool in there. Just delete it. Okay. I have that image database saved out. I'm going to use it later, and I'm just going to set it aside for right now. Questions or concerns? No. That's all I want you to do at this point, is just get that image database. Like I said, we're going to use it later at the end of the day tomorrow. So at this point, I'm going to let us have a break.